It was close to 3 a.m., and the city outside was silent. The streets were empty, the lights were dim, and the night carried a heavy stillness. Inside her quiet home, Sandra Bullock sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone in her hand. Her heart was racing and her mind felt clouded with thoughts she could not push away. Sometimes, no matter how strong a person seemed to the world, there came a moment when even the strongest needed someone to lean on. This night was that moment for her. Sandra had faced so many challenges in her life. She was admired as a talented actress, a woman who could light up the screen and hold a crowd's attention. But behind the smiles and the applause, she carried struggles that were unseen. That night, something heavy had broken inside her. It was a mix of loneliness, fear, and memories she thought she had hidden. It was too late to call anyone, too late for family, too late for friends. Yet her fingers hovered over one name on her phone: Keanu Reeves. Keanu was not just another friend. He was different. He had always carried a quiet calm, a kindness that felt rare in a world where people often rushed past each other. He had shown her, time and time again, that true friendship was not about grand words or loud promises. It was about being present, about standing steady when the world around someone was falling apart. Sandra hesitated. Should she disturb him at this hour? It was 3 a.m. What if he was asleep? What if he thought she was weak for reaching out? The doubts filled her head, but the heaviness in her heart was stronger. Her hands shook as she pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, and then his calm voice answered. "Sandra?" His tone was gentle, not groggy, not annoyed, just calm, like he had been awake, waiting for someone who needed him. Her voice broke. "I'm sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else to call." Keanu did not ask questions. He did not ask why or what had happened. Instead, he spoke with quiet certainty. "You did the right thing. I'm here. Tell me where you are." For a moment, Sandra could not speak. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and silence filled the line. But that silence was not empty. It was safe. It was filled with the weight of someone who truly listened. Within minutes, Keanu was on his way. He did not care about the time, the cold night, or the fact that no one else would have blamed him for staying home. Friendship to him was not about comfort. It was about showing up when it mattered most. When he arrived at her home, Sandra opened the door with red eyes and a trembling smile. She tried to speak, but words failed. Keanu stepped inside, carrying no judgment, only presence. He sat beside her in the quiet living room, the clock ticking softly in the background. "You don't have to explain," he said, his voice steady. "Sometimes it's enough to just sit and breathe." And that was exactly what they did. For long minutes they sat in silence. No cameras, no lights, no stage, just two people. One broken, the other offering strength without asking for anything in return. Sandra looked at him, and in that moment she realized something powerful. True friendship was not about how often someone laughed with you during the day, but about who stayed awake for you in the darkest hours of the night. As the clock slowly moved past 3 a.m., the air in the room grew lighter. Sandra's tears slowed, replaced with a fragile but real sense of peace. Keanu's presence reminded her of something she had almost forgotten, that she was not alone. But what neither of them knew was that this night, this moment of quiet support, would lead to a chain of events that would test their bond in ways they had never imagined. What started as a call for help at 3 a.m. would grow into a story of resilience, trust, and the pure meaning of kindness. The night was far from over. The night slowly moved forward, but neither Sandra nor Keanu felt the weight of the hours. The quiet living room became a safe corner of the world, away from the noise, away from expectations. Sandra sat curled on the couch, her eyes swollen from crying, but for the first time in many weeks, her shoulders felt lighter. Keanu sat across from her, calm and steady, his presence stronger than any words could ever be. Finally, Sandra spoke in a soft, shaky voice. I don't know why tonight broke me. Maybe it was too many things at once. I've been carrying them, hiding them, pretending I'm fine, but tonight it felt like everything collapsed. Keanu listened without interrupting. He leaned forward, slightly, his eyes kind, giving her space to release what she had buried. People see me smiling, working, walking red carpets, and they think I'm unshakable, Sandra continued. But they don't see the nights I sit alone, when memories come back, when doubts whisper that I'm not strong enough, and tonight, it was unbearable. I thought, if I don't reach out now, I might lose myself. The words hung in the air. Keanu did not try to solve her pain. Instead, he spoke with honesty. It takes courage to admit that. Most people pretend until they fall apart. You chose to call. That is not weakness, Sandra. That is strength. She wiped her face, almost embarrassed. But why you? Why was your name the one I pressed? Keanu gave a small smile, humble and sincere. Maybe because you know I'll never judge. Friendship is not about fixing. It's about standing beside someone so they don't fall alone. Those words struck deep. Sandra felt her chest tighten, but this time not with fear. It was gratitude. As the minutes passed, Keanu quietly made her tea, moving around her kitchen with a calm familiarity. He placed the warm cup in her hands and sat back down. They spoke little, but the silence was never empty. It was filled with trust, respect, and something even deeper, an unspoken promise that she was safe. But as dawn slowly touched the edges of the sky outside, something shifted. Sandra's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it, and her face grew pale. Keanu noticed immediately. "What is it?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her voice low. "It's a message from someone I hoped I'd never hear from again." Her hands shook as she handed him the phone. On the screen was a short text. "You can't hide forever. We need to talk." Keanu read it, his calm face unreadable. "Who is this?" he asked. Sandra's lips trembled as she whispered the name. It was someone from her past, someone connected to painful memories she thought she had buried. "This person nearly destroyed me," she admitted, tears returning. "They left scars I don't talk about. And now, they want to come back." The room grew tense, the air heavy with a sudden weight. Sandra looked at Keanu, fear flickering in her eyes. What if they try to hurt me again? What if I'm not strong enough to face it? Keanu leaned closer, his voice steady, filled with quiet strength. "You are not alone, not this time. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Sandra stared at him, her tears shining, her heart caught between fear and relief. For the first time, she believed those words. Outside, the sun rose slowly. But inside the house, shadows of the past were beginning to awaken. The call for help at 3 a.m. had brought comfort, but it had also opened a door Sandra thought was locked forever. The real test of friendship, resilience, and kindness was only just beginning. The morning light filled the room, but instead of comfort, it brought unease. Sandra held the phone in her hands as if it carried a weight too heavy to bear. Her eyes were locked on the message, the words echoing in her head. "You can't hide forever. We need to talk." Keanu sat across from her, his calm face steady. He did not push her, but his silence carried an invitation, an open space for her to share. Finally, Sandra broke it. "His name is Michael," she whispered. "We were close once, years ago, but he turned cold. He hurt me, not just with words, but in ways that left scars I still carry. I thought I was free from him when I walked away, but he never truly left. His shadow followed me, no matter how far I ran." Keanu leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees. "And now he wants to return?" Sandra nodded. "I don't know why. Maybe to control me again? Maybe to remind me of his power. I tried so hard to erase him from my life, but here he is, like a ghost knocking on my door at dawn." Her voice cracked. "Keanu, what if I can't face him? What if I fall apart again? He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked at her with eyes that carried both gentleness and strength. You don't have to face him alone. You reached out last night because you needed someone to stand with you. I am still here, and I will be here no matter what he brings. Those words were simple, yet they carried a force Sandra had not felt in years. Still, doubt filled her. She had faced Michael before, and the memory of that pain was carved deep inside. Later that day, as the hours passed, Sandra tried to distract herself. She cleaned, she paced, she even tried to laugh at old movies, but nothing worked. Every vibration of her phone made her jump. Keanu stayed nearby, never hovering too much but never leaving her side either. His presence was like a shield, quiet, strong, unshakable. In the afternoon, another message arrived. This one sharper, colder. I know where to find you. Don't make me come. Sandra's heart sank. Her breath caught in her throat. She handed the phone to Keanu without a word. He read it slowly, then looked up at her. His calm had not cracked, but there was a firmness in his eyes now. This is not just about fear anymore. This is about standing up for yourself. He wants control, but you are stronger now and you have people who care about you. Sandra shook her head. Stronger? I feel weaker than ever. Keanu leaned closer, his voice steady, each word measured. Strength is not about never feeling fear. It is about moving forward even when fear is heavy. You showed strength when you called me. You showed strength when you spoke his name. And you will show it again when you decide not to let him rule your life anymore. Her eyes filled with tears. No one had spoken to her like that. No one had reminded her that even in her brokenness, she carried courage. The day stretched into evening, and Sandra knew she could not avoid the truth. Michael was not going away. His words were pressing in, demanding a response. At sunset, she turned to Keanu, her voice quiet but firm. I can't run anymore. If I run, he wins. But I can't face him alone. Will you stand with me if he comes? Keanu's answer was immediate. Always. The room fell into silence, but this time the silence carried power. For the first time, Sandra felt the faint spark of something she had lost, hope. Yet deep inside, she also felt the tremor of what was to come. Because people like Michael did not reach out to talk. They reached out to take, to break, to control. And she knew that soon, very soon, the past she had tried so hard to bury would come knocking at her door. The night returned faster than Sandra expected. All day she had felt the weight of waiting, every sound making her heart race. By evening, the house was quiet again, but this silence was different from the calm of the night before. It was tense, like the air before a storm. Keanu noticed the way she kept glancing at the window, the way her hands trembled when she reached for her cup. He did not tell her to calm down. He knew words like that never worked. Instead, he simply said, Whatever happens tonight, you are not alone. Around midnight, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the house like a blade. Sandra froze. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. She whispered, It's him. Keanu stood slowly, his calm never breaking. Then we face him together. Sandra's legs felt weak, but she followed him to the door. When it opened, the figure standing there made her blood run cold. Michael stood tall, his face hardened by years, his eyes sharp and cold. He carried no smile, only a heavy stare that made the air feel suffocating. Sandra, he said, his voice low, almost mocking. I knew you couldn't hide forever. Her lips parted, but no words came. Memories of pain rushed back like waves crashing against her. For a moment, she felt like the same broken woman from years ago, but then she felt Keanu's presence beside her, steady and grounded. His calm gave her something to hold on to. Keanu spoke first, his tone steady but firm. You're not welcome here. Michael's eyes narrowed. And who are you to decide that? A friend, Keanu said, his gaze unshakable. And sometimes a friend is enough. The words hung heavy in the air. Michael gave a cold laugh, shaking his head. Still hiding behind others, Sandra? You haven't changed. You're weak. The insult hit hard, but before Sandra could crumble, Keanu placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She is not weak, he said firmly. She is stronger than you know. And tonight, she has no reason to listen to your poison. Michael stepped closer, but Keanu did not move back. The tension filled the doorway, two forces standing in silence, neither blinking. Sandra's heart pounded, fear battling with the faint flicker of courage. Finally, she found her voice. It shook, but it carried truth. I am not the same person you once controlled. I don't owe you anything. Not my time, not my fear, not my life. Leave. Michael's jaw tightened, his cold eyes shifting between her and Keanu. For a moment, it looked like he would push inside, but then something in her voice made him pause. Perhaps it was the strength he had not expected. Perhaps it was the presence of Keanu standing solid, refusing to step aside. With a bitter smirk, Michael leaned closer. This isn't over, he whispered. I always get what I want. Then he turned and walked away into the shadows of the night. The door closed, but Sandra's body shook. Tears streamed down her face, not only from fear but also from release. Keanu wrapped a steady arm around her shoulders, guiding her back to the couch. You stood up to him, he said quietly. You faced the storm. Sandra buried her face in her hands. But he'll come back. I know he will. He won't stop. Keanu's voice was calm but filled with conviction. Then we'll be ready. Storms can return, but so can courage. You will not face this alone. Sandra looked at him through her tears, and for the first time, she believed that maybe she could fight back. Maybe the woman who once broke could learn to stand again. But outside, somewhere in the darkness, Michael's words lingered. This isn't over, and Sandra knew he meant them. The night after Michael's visit was restless. Sandra lay awake, staring at the ceiling, every shadow in the room reminding her of his words. This isn't over. The phrase repeated in her head like a drumbeat, heavy and suffocating. She wanted to believe that standing up to him had closed a chapter, but deep down she knew it had only opened another. Keanu sat quietly in the chair near the window, keeping watch. He had insisted on staying the night, not because he doubted Sandra's strength, but because he understood the weight of silence when fear filled the air. His calm presence made the room feel less threatening. Even when Sandra could not sleep, his steady breathing gave her comfort. By morning, the world outside looked normal again. Sunlight poured in, birds sang, and neighbors walked their dogs as if nothing had happened. But inside, Sandra felt like a storm still raged. She tried to drink her coffee, but her hands trembled. Keanu noticed and gently said, You don't have to pretend with me. Fear is real. But fear does not mean you are broken. She looked at him, her eyes red from exhaustion. I don't want him to have power over me anymore. I don't want to keep living like this. But I don't know how to stop him. Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady. The first step is remembering who you are now, not who you were then. He wants you to feel small, but you are not small anymore. You have lived, you have grown, you have survived things he will never understand. His words gave her strength, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. Her stomach sank as she read the message aloud. You think you're safe because of him? Let's see how long that lasts. Her breath caught. The threat was clear this time. It was no longer about memories. It was about the present. Keanu stood, his calm replaced by quiet determination. Then it's time to stop waiting for him to decide the rules. You choose now. We prepare, we face him, and we don't let him take another piece of your life. Sandra swallowed hard. But what if I can't stand it? What if he breaks me again? Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Then lean on me until you remember your own strength. That's what friendship is for. Later that day, they took small steps forward. Keanu helped her change the locks, check the cameras, and create a safe plan. But the most powerful step was the one Sandra took herself. She sat down with pen and paper and began to write, not to Michael, but to herself. She wrote about the woman she had been, the pain she had carried, and the strength she wanted to claim now. With every word, she began to see that her story was not just about fear, but also about resilience. As the evening came, the phone rang again. This time it was not a message. It was a call. The name on the screen made her chest tighten. Michael. She froze, her hand hovering over the phone. Keanu watched her, giving no pressure, only steady presence. Finally, with a deep breath, Sandra answered. What do you want? Her voice trembled, but she spoke. Michael's laugh came through the line, cold and sharp. I want you to remember who's in control. You can bring anyone you want, friends, guards, even him. It won't matter. I always win. Her grip tightened on the phone, but before she could respond, Keanu leaned closer and whispered, "You don't have to let his words cut you. You have the choice to end the call." And for the first time in years, Sandra chose herself. She ended the call. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were different now. They were not only tears of fear, they were tears of release. She had broken a chain, even if only a small one. Keanu smiled softly. That's the beginning of taking your life back. But both of them knew it was only the beginning. Michael would not give up easily. The storm was still coming. The days after the call were filled with unease. Sandra tried to live normally, but every corner of her mind was haunted by the thought that Michael was still out there, planning his next move. She knew him too well. He was not the type to fade into silence. When he said this isn't over, he meant it. Keanu stayed close. He never hovered, never controlled, but he made sure she was never alone in the heaviness of her fear. His calm was like an anchor, keeping her steady when her own thoughts threatened to pull her under. But on the third night, everything changed. It was close to midnight when Sandra heard a noise outside. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then came the sharp sound of something against the window. Her heart raced. She moved slowly toward the curtain, and when she pulled it back, she froze. Michael was standing in the shadows of her yard. His figure was still, his eyes fixed on the house, cold and piercing. Sandra stumbled back, fear choking her. "He's here," she whispered. Keanu moved quickly, pulling her gently behind him. His voice was calm but strong. "Stay here." He stepped toward the door, his movements steady, unshaken. When he opened it, Michael took a slow step forward, his smirk visible under the dim light. "Still protecting her?" Michael said, his tone mocking. "You think you can save her from me?" Keanu's voice was firm, his eyes locked on Michael. I know. She doesn't belong to your darkness anymore." Michael laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "You can't erase history. She will always carry what I left behind. I don't even have to touch her now. Her fear is enough. Look at her, she's already breaking." Sandra, standing just inside the doorway, felt the words stab at her. Part of her wanted to shrink, to hide, to believe that Michael was right. But then she looked at Keanu, steady, calm, unshaken. She realized something. Michael thrived on fear, and every time she stayed silent, every time she let him control her emotions, she was feeding his power. Her hands trembled, but she stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she spoke. "No, Michael. You don't own me anymore. I am not your victim. Not tonight, not ever again." Michael's smirk faltered for the first time. "You think words can change what you are?" Sandra's breath was heavy, but her eyes held strength. "Words may not erase the past, but they shape the future. And my future has no place for you." Keanu placed his hand gently on her shoulder, supporting her, grounding her. Together, they stood facing the man who had tried to break her. Michael's eyes darkened, his anger rising. But he saw something different now, something he had not expected. He saw a woman who no longer shook at his presence, a woman who had found her voice again. With a bitter glare, he stepped back into the shadows. "This isn't finished," he hissed. "But you'll regret this." He disappeared into the night, leaving only the echo of his threat. Sandra collapsed into the couch, her body shaking, tears spilling down her face. Keanu knelt beside her, holding her hands. "You did it," he whispered. "You stood tall. You looked him in the eyes, and you told him the truth. That is strength." Through her tears, Sandra smiled faintly. "For the first time, I didn't feel like a prisoner of my past." Keanu's calm voice wrapped around her like a shield. "And that is only the beginning. He may return, but every time he does, you'll be stronger. Because now, he is fighting against more than just you. He is fighting against the courage you've found, and the friendship that will never leave you." The night was still heavy, the threat not gone. But Sandra felt something new rising inside her. It was not just survival, it was resilience. And as she sat beside Keanu, she realized that sometimes true friendship was not about saving someone from the storm. It was about standing with them until they remembered they could face it themselves. The night after Michael's threat lingered like a heavy cloud. Sandra could not sleep, but this time the fear felt different. It was not the fear of a powerless woman. It was the fear of someone standing on the edge of change, someone who finally had the chance to break free from the chains of the past. Keanu sat beside her, quiet as always, but his silence carried strength. The following morning, Sandra made a choice. She could not keep waiting for Michael to strike again. Living in fear was no longer an option. She wanted to reclaim her life. With Keanu's support, she reached out to people who could help: lawyers, authorities, trusted friends. It was not easy. Speaking about her past was painful, but every time she faltered, Keanu reminded her with a steady look, "You are not alone." As days passed, Michael tried again with more messages. They were filled with threats, with attempts to pull her back into the darkness. But Sandra no longer answered. Every time the phone buzzed, she reminded herself of the night she told him, "You don't own me anymore." Each ignored message was another victory, another piece of power taken back. But the final test came one evening, when Michael appeared once more outside her home. This time, Sandra did not hide behind the curtain. She walked to the door, her steps steady, her heart beating fast but strong. Keanu stood with her, not to speak for her, but to remind her she was not facing the storm alone. When the door opened, Michael's eyes narrowed. "So you think you're free of me?" he said, his voice sharp. Sandra's voice shook at first, but it carried strength. "I don't think, I know. You no longer control me. You can stand here all night, but it won't change anything. I am done being afraid of you. I have my voice back, I have my strength back, and I have people who stand with me. You cannot take that away." For the first time, Michael's power cracked. He saw in her eyes something he could not control: courage. His smirk faltered, replaced by frustration. With a bitter sneer, he stepped back into the night, defeated not by force, but by the strength of a woman who no longer bowed to his shadow. When the door closed, Sandra's knees weakened, but Keanu caught her. She cried not from fear but from release. Years of pain, silence, and doubt poured out of her in tears, and for the first time, she felt free. Keanu held her quietly. No grand words, only presence. When her breathing steadied, he spoke softly. "This is what resilience looks like. You faced your past and chose your future. You proved to yourself that you are stronger than the darkness." Sandra wiped her tears and smiled faintly. "I couldn't have done it alone." Keanu shook his head gently. "You were never alone. True friendship means walking into the storm with someone until they find their own light again. You had the strength all along, I only reminded you." The room was silent, but this silence carried peace, not fear. The storm had passed, and the woman who once trembled at midnight now stood taller, freer, stronger. As the days turned into weeks, Sandra began to live differently. She laughed more, she walked with confidence, and she no longer looked over her shoulder. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined her. They had become reminders of how far she had come. Keanu remained by her side, not as a savior, but as a true friend, a friend who showed her that kindness, humility, and respect could heal wounds that once seemed impossible to close. And in the end, what began as a call for help at 3 a.m. became a story of resilience, a lesson that true friendship can stand against even the darkest shadows, and a reminder that sometimes the quietest gestures speak louder than all the noise in the world.